Let's get you up to date on Forge FC. This is Focus on Forge with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli. It is Focus on Forge. Forge very focused. After a 3-0 win over HFX Wanderers FC out in Halifax over the weekend, and with that win, Forge has now outscored Halifax 7-0 in their last two matches at Wanderers grounds, which is supposed to be one of the most difficult stadiums to play in. Calling that match was Adam Jenkins, play-by-play announcer at One Soccer, and he joins us now. Adam, I can't say I'm surprised by Forge's effort against Halifax. I am surprised that there wasn't more pushback, just judging by how the last match in Halifax went between these two clubs. To outscore Halifax 7-0 in your last two matches at Wanderers ground, which is supposed to be one of the toughest places to play, it speaks to Forge's quality, but also speaks to Halifax. We could speculate, and certainly coaches and players did after the match, but just something was a little off with the Wanderers.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to look a whole lot further, in my opinion, than midfield. I think no Gagnon Lapare, no Rampersad was the biggest difference in the entire game. Forge's midfield dominated, and there was some shoddy defending. I don't think that's unfair to Halifax at times. I mean, Mateo Restrepo still getting back into form. Of course, the red card was just the unfortunate cherry on the cake for them, but still being without Peter Schala has been a difficulty for them. It was good to see him get a 10-minute run, but it was just one team was better than the other on the day, as much as it boils down to.
Yeah, post-match, one of the things I love about this sport is that you don't get this level of honesty from coaches and players after a match in any other sport. Stephen Hart, Christian Oxner, the keeper, spoke as well after the match, and Hart literally just said, "We didn't run." I mean, you're playing soccer and you didn't run. There's just no excuse for it. And I think they would have accepted the result had they put in a bigger effort. But Forge was allowed to pretty much do whatever they wanted, it seemed like.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot that Stephen is in right now because, I think the assessment after 3-0 was a little bit more unfair than 4-0 was, but they're in a bit of damage control right now because the results just aren't acceptable for that supporters group. And I don't think Halifax is a market where if the team doesn't make the playoffs in X amount of years or what have you, that the supporters are going to abandon them. It's not one of those. And there are some markets in the CPL where that would be the case. But what I think Steven's trying to do is shoulder a lot of the blame, which I don't think he deserves because he's not out there running. But at the same time, admitting that it's not been good enough. And I think sometimes that's all, I shouldn't say that's all supporters want to hear, but it's important for supporters to hear that the staff isn't accepting what was put on the pitch. And it was just the case. I think when the first goal went in, there was some anxiety. There were a few times in that match that was as quiet as I've ever heard Wanderers ground, where they remembered how quickly it got carried away. And I think that was one of Oxner's best performances in his Halifax career. To be fair to him, it could have been a lot worse, but they're undermanned. I mean, Joao Morelli was a big loss, but you can't, if you're Halifax, be without Joao Morelli, be without Gagnon Lapare, be without Rampersad. It's just not good enough. And Daniels, they don't really know where to put him, where he can be most efficient. Seems like he needs to be in midfield, but at that point, you sort of miss some of his attacking quality. And then as soon as the second one went in from Noah Jensen, it was game over, and Halifax knew it. And it almost became a scrimmage out there for Forge. It was unfortunate for Wanderers fans, but I'm sure absolutely delightful for Forge supporters.
Yeah, and just one last thing on Oxner after the match, when he had one of the best lines I had heard, and it was, he was asked about the guys that were playing and filling in for some of the starters, and if it held him back a bit, and he just said, those guys that got an opportunity are the same guys that might complain they're not getting enough minutes or getting enough playing time. And they were given that opportunity and didn't perform. I thought that was an honest way of assessing what happened and just, the lack of effort. Now, you mentioned Noah Jensen. He's been on the radar of Forge fans for most of the year. And those similarities to Kyle Becker always kind of come up. He's been a leader throughout his career, young career. In college, he was a captain. And I think we're looking at the kind of, you look at the two teams, and that was the difference. We talk about depth and versatility in this league. Forge had some guys out, needed some guys to step in. Not only did they step in, they didn't even miss a beat. And Noah Jensen, a prime example, who got, I believe, his second goal of the season now.
It was the second, and he was impressive. He was one of those, I don't want to call him an unknown commodity, but when I saw him playing at Azteca, I was like, okay, this is bold from Bobby. And I understand that at that point, they knew the tie was out of their hands, and it was important for Bobby to get some young guys some minutes, but he didn't look out of place. He didn't look daunted. And I think there's an expectation if Smirniotis is going to call your name and bring you onto the field, you better be ready and you better not show any fear. And Noah certainly doesn't do that. I don't know that I'm ready to say the next Kyle Becker, but I think I use Kyle Becker light in the broadcast because he does a lot of the similar things and he's getting his moments. He's aggressive where he needs to be. The stats back it up. He like the shots in the final third, the entries into the final third. And I really enjoyed seeing, even though he was playing at the 10 and Kyle was kind of holding a bit more, he was a conduit a lot of times where sort of the ball would be worked out of the back, whether it's Becker getting it, whether it's Sissoko getting it. But Jensen would understand when he needed to make the runs into the box to open up the wings or when he was going to receive the pass, get it out wide, and then keep running forward and putting himself into good positions. He was very, very offensively sound in the match, and I think that was really important for him. And I mean, he won a tackle. It wasn't like he needed to do a lot defensively, but he went into a couple of them. He won one of them, and it's positive for him. Kyle Becker's not going to play forever. I mean, 100 is in the next match for Kyle Becker, which is absolutely outstanding. Whether Noah's able to stay with Forge before someone else poaches him and gives him more of a defined role because Kyle's not going anywhere anytime soon. But I think of all of the newcomers, of course, Sissoko's the one that really stands out for me, but you got to put Jensen up there with the Ramas as well. He's been great and he's still so young.
Yeah, and the Forge attack and why it's so difficult to defend is I mean, you saw it on display. Obviously, they have the players in the middle that can move the ball and that can create offense. But the wings, I mean, the way the fullbacks and wingers work in tandem, whether it's, Chouanier and Rama or it's Borges and Morgan, there's a cohesion where it doesn't matter where you want to try and emphasize your defense against Forge. This season, especially, over the last, few weeks, they can beat you in so many different ways. And it's going to be difficult for any club to be able to just hold Forge to under 2 goals a match at this point, it looks like.
Yes, the matchup with the Wings is going to be team dependent. I think there's some where I would have said York and Forge is actually more of a matchup than people give it credit for with Abzi and Ensa, but now we know that he's done in the Canadian Premier League after Wednesdays, which isn't even the CPL anymore. So I think Angus is going to have to spend his money well from whatever that sale is there, if there's even much. But does Eduardo Jesus step in? Is he able to sort of play? But you can go up and down the CPL. There's not many that can keep up with Tristan and David when they're at the peak of their form, when they're playing as confident as they are. This has been a much better rebound season for Tristan. This is 2019 Tristan Borges, if not better. And David Chouanier, I think the first couple of years, he's always been good, but with the players in front of him on the depth chart, he wasn't always getting consistent, sustained starts. And I think that would affect him in moments. He absorbed the moniker of the king of CONCACAF, as I like to call him, because he was always so good in CONCACAF League. And of course he has his goal in CONCACAF Champions League now, but he wasn't always getting the starts and the stats in league play. And I think that was the next step for him. And Bobby's been very complimentary of his performances, as he should be. He's, as much as Manny Aparicio has been getting a lot of MVP shouts prior to the injury, I don't think we're long away from putting Chouanier into that category, because he's scoring the brilliant goals. We know he has more brilliant goals in him, but how he's been playing distributor, that final pass, there has been nobody more entertaining to watch than Sissoko Chouanier right now. That first pass from Sissoko, which is going to give him the hockey assist, but nothing in league play. And then Chouanier, whether he takes it on himself, if you're a defender, you have to respect that he can shoot. then you give him that little bit of extra respect that you need to for his shot, and he's found somebody else. And whether it's Campbell, whether it's Pasillas, I mean, Jensen the other day, Welshman, the attack is there, which it wasn't at the beginning of the year. And Forge is playing confident. I think the only thing you can complain about if you're Forge right now is the fact that the CPL is not single table, because if it was, I think we wouldn't be long from saying it's a 2-horse race for the North Star Shield. So the playoffs make that interesting, but I don't think there's a single thing in Forge land that you wouldn't be excited about, other than the fact you won't have Sissoko for the next game on a YCA suspension.
Yeah, and the Sissoko is interesting too, because he was playing fullback early this season just due to injuries, and then Rama comes in, and I mean, he comes in, he's not even. I mean, he was playing out in the UK. He talks about how he struggles with his English. I actually think he's doing pretty well, but he jumps into a situation he's unfamiliar with, and he just hits the ground running. His style, the physicality. He's also been able to connect plays and contribute offensively with some passes. And I mean, I don't think anyone, maybe at least not here, no one really knew who Rama was. But now you add him, Sissoko can move back into the middle, and things have really taken shape. And there's a lot of guys out. So Bobby, he always says it's a great problem to have, but he does have some difficult decisions to make, as we approach the middle of the season here.
Yeah, well, I promise Rama that his English is better than my Albanian or Greek would be. So I think he's doing just fine with his second or probably fourth language. I don't even know with that man. But I was surprised actually at first. In hearing Bobby say he's the best right back in the CPL, I was like, okay, hang on a second. How long has he been here? And then you think about his performances, you think about his quality, you think about all the things he's done since arriving and now being deployed at right back. And I go, he's right. There is nobody better at that position right now. And I always sort of deferred that to Ensa. I thought was always underrated at that position, but Rama's got a more complete game. It's what I like about watching him play is we know he's very gifted offensively, but on the counter, when you get forward, you either have to have the pace and the stamina, the fitness to get back into position. But when you're backtracking, you cannot be careless in your tackles. You can't leave your feet too much if you're not sure that you're going to get the ball. And he wins most of his tackles standing up. I think it's been brilliant. And you sort of think about, okay, what's Bobby's best 11? I don't think we're far from it. I think Crutson's in for Owolabi Belowu. I don't know that I touch anything else right now. Is it Campbell? Is it Pasillas who starts in a CPL final if we're doing the hypothetical, or a one-match winner take all? I think at the moment with this team, those are your two questions. I mean, I'd love to see Alex be able to get forward again and play in the position that he wants to be, but he's been too good at center back. I don't know how you move him. So the only people I think that might be a little bit nervous or hot under the collar right now are the players who can't seem to get to full fitness, whether that's Grant, whether that's Samuel. I mean, there's still roles for them in this team, but with the run of form Forge is on, I don't know what you change if you're Smyrniotis. Like the club's ability to retool on the fly, whether that's from Sigma or bringing Rama in, as you rightfully point out, from destinations unknown. Who is this guy? Oh, he's one of the best defenders in the CPL. Fantastic. There's another check for Forge. It's probably very frustrating for supporters of other clubs, and for the neutral, for the Forge supporter, it's very impressive to see how they're able to adjust. And once they find the formula, it's not just flash in the pan. It's continued success, and they're not gonna see Halifax for a little bit now. So maybe we won't see as many goals being scored, especially with the depleted Halifax side. But I mean, by the time they get back to level with everyone on matches played, they'll be in first or second. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2-horse race. So, I mean, let's look at the table. I looked at the top 4 yesterday and thought maybe I think these 4 are probably the top 4 on the league right now: Calvary, Pacific, Atletico, and Forge. But then, Atletico lose against Edmonton, who, I mean, I don't, if you, unless you are an Ottawa supporter, you're probably pretty happy to see Edmonton finally get a win. I think it's deserved. I mean, they've come so close and they are working really hard, and there's some limitations in that roster, but it was nice to see Edmonton get 3 points. So now I don't know. I mean, Atletico could drop out of that. When you say 2-horse race, I assume you mean Calvary and Forge. Is there a third club that could maybe play spoiler, or maybe just come on late when they get healthy or get some bodies back?
I think third it's Atletico Ottawa. I mean, I don't think the loss to Edmonton is what's the word I'm looking for? Is a direct reflection of solely negativity to Atletico Ottawa. Someone at some point was going to be the team that Edmonton got their first win again. But I think Ottawa's very, very good. Having said that, there are tiers in the CPL right now. If Forge and Cavalry are tier 1, Forge supporters are not going to like this. I had Cavalry as my champions preseason, just because I think they're due with the timing, and sometimes that's all the hunch you need when you're making your preseason predictions. But to me, Forge Cavalry, they are the top tier, and I think there's a gap still. That's why I made the comment about the single table, where I think there's some supporters that be like, oh, if only, because that's, in my opinion, by season's end, those probably going to be several points between those two and the rest. Ottawa's in that second tier, and comfortably in the second tier. Pacific's in that second tier. I had Valor as a playoff team before the season started. Their offense is almost as concerning as York's. I just don't know, especially losing a key piece like Abzi, if York are going to be able to hang in there long enough. Now, we have to remind ourselves the season's not yet 35% of the way through. Having said that, it doesn't take long for these swings to go on. I think Halifax is really hurting right now. They're going to need to put some runs together, like 2 or 3 wins in a row to, at some point in the season, to really keep pace. Otherwise, they're going to drop off. But I think we know Edmonton's situation. We're very happy for them, obviously. They're rightfully, like, they're not in a poor position. They should probably just have a few more points. To me, then, you got the Halifax York in that tier. Valor, they need to prove it, but I do think they belong in that tier with Pacific and with Ottawa, like we saw them do the 6-1. And we're almost going to get to the point where we have to stop talking about 6-1 because we haven't seen the goals since then. So yes, so that's a very long-winded way of saying I think there's 3 tiers right now. You put Forge and Cavalry, and I don't even know who I would take in a one-match winner take all. I think it would depend on where they're playing, the conditions, et cetera, et cetera. Then Pacific, Ottawa, Valor's on the fringe, and then there's that third tier. And it's not that I think York can't get to tier 2, but at some point you got to score goals. And I think Canadian Championship for them on Wednesday is going to be massive. If they get through, it's of course going to be a massive story. They're the first CPL team to play all 3 Major League Soccer sides. And even if it doesn't go their way, I even mentioned this on the Newsroom podcast earlier. We saw what happened to Forge after they got thoroughly dismantled in the Canadian Championship. They've been a completely different version, a completely better version of themselves since. I think win or lose, this is going to be the kick that York needs. They just got to start scoring some goals here.
Yeah, that 4-0 win against Halifax for Forge, and then that 3-0 loss to Montreal really just changed the trajectory of the season. And that Forge club was upset with that performance, and they've righted those wrongs. If you're listening to CPL Soccer or watching CPL Soccer on One Soccer, you're probably hearing Adam Jenkins' voice.
Sorry about that.
one of the best of the biz. Thanks so much for joining us as always, and enjoy. I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure, Anthony. Anytime.
All right, Forge FC with a bit of a break, at least in terms of matches. They'll still be working, of course, preparing for Valor. That is not until next Wednesday, June 29th. Valor making the trip to Tim Hortons Field to take on Forge, and then Forge will have another home match that weekend. So, bit of a layoff, 10 days off or so in between games, and then they'll play 2 games in a span of 5 days. So, play Valor on the 29th, then they will host Atletico Ottawa on July 3rd. Tickets still available for both. I'll be there. I hope to see you there. Remember, keep it locked to the Forge Audio Network. However you get your podcasts, you can get us on YouTube, the official website of Forge we are on, as well as Forge's social media. So many different avenues to get the Forge Audio Network and to get all the Forge content, the most Forge content you can get anywhere. Coming up, we'll take you behind the beard with head coach and technical director Bobby Smirniotis, and we have some other fun things planned this week. So keep checking, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that fun stuff. We'll talk to you soon.
Anthony Urciuoli and Focus on Forge. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to the Forge Audio Network.